Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations with Vegan Women Leaders. I'm your host, Katrina Fox, and I'm delighted to welcome to the show today the one and only Ingrid Newkirk, the founder and president of PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which is the largest animal rights organization in the world with 6.5 million members. Now, Ingrid, I could read a whole essay for Ingrid's bio for all the amazing things she's done and all the experiences. But suffice to say, she's spoken internationally on animal rights issues from anywhere from the Canadian Parliament to the streets of New Delhi and probably everywhere in between. She's also the author of 14 books. Her latest book is called Animalkind, Remarkable Discoveries About Animals and Revolutionary New Ways to Show Them Compassion. I love that title, and we definitely need to do more of that. And this is about other species' awe-inspiring abilities and how easy it is to treat them with respect rather than exploit them. Ingrid, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Katrina. Delighted that you're having me. Thank you so much. And I've also been in Australia on a sheep ranch or two because 60 Minutes Australia long ago invited me over to give me a hard time. But it was a great trip and I learned a lot and I saw a lot of things that I hope will one day end.
I can imagine. Absolutely. It's sort of progress can be, it's sort of, sometimes it's two, as I'm sure you know, sometimes it'd be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But obviously, you know, PETA has been around. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But I would love to start off with a bit about you. Now, I know you've shared your story before, but so I'm just going to give a little summary and then get you to expand on it. So you're British, like me, but you grew up in India under colonialism and you went to boarding school with nuns. And then at the same time, your mother worked with Mother Teresa and you also volunteered and helped out, you know, I think with preparing bandages, sorting out pills for lepers, and I think also working with unwed mothers, which was, I believe was a passion project of your mother. With all that combined, how did those experiences impact you and how would you say that they've shaped you today?
Well, I have a lot to be thankful for in my mother. My mother she's gone now, but everybody would say she'd give you the shirt off her back. And she would. She always stopped if anybody was in need, if anyone came to the front door. We lived in a quite snobbish community, diplomats and, you know, high soaring people. But my mother always had the gate open. And if a beggar came by, she always had something. If somebody wanted to sell something, she always looked after them. And we always stopped the car for any animals in trouble. But Katrina, you know how it is some people are born with a particular affiliation or interest. I was always absolutely drawn to animals. And my mother used to say, it doesn't matter who suffers, it's that they suffer and what you can do to help them. And when I was born, there was a dog already in my household called Sean. And I was an only child, and he and I grew up like brother and sister. We went everywhere together. We got car sick at the same time together. We slept in each other's beds, and he knew what I was feeling, and I think I knew what he was feeling. And so there was a bond there that made me think we're all in this together. We're all the same. I never knew he was a dog and that I was a human being.
I love that. I can relate to that because there was a time in my childhood where I said my best friend was my cat Kitty because some of the other children being horrible to me, but my cat would always love me. So I can definitely relate to that. Now, you grew up in the boarding school with nuns, and I think you've said previously you didn't have a very good time there. Has that kind of impacted you in terms of, like, I don't know whether you're spiritual or religious or in any way? How did that kind of impact you?
I'm not spiritual or religious in any way. I'm pretty much a practical person. It may have impacted me because they were so mean. The nuns that we had, I think, resented the fact that they had been thrown away by their family. They'd been sent to serve the Lord. It wasn't a voluntary thing for them. They were from Irish families that at that time were quite large, couldn't all be fed probably and looked after. And so the family always gave some children to the church. And the nuns were resentful because here were we, little rich kids, who had everything at our feet and going out into the world where they would live and die in the convent. So they were really mean to us and physically abusive too. But I was always in love with the school dogs, and they were my great comfort. So I don't know how much it influenced me, but it did turn me against religion, which it probably shouldn't have, but it did.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I believe, again, you were going to be a stockbroker, but when you found some kittens, some abandoned kittens, you took them to a shelter. The shelter immediately euthanized or killed these healthy kittens, and you were horrified. You got a job at this kennel. You blew the whistle. Then you trained as a sheriff, as a law enforcement, and became, I believe, the first female pound master in the area. What was it like for you back then? Because I would imagine, like, being a woman in law enforcement, any time, has its challenges. What was it like for you back then? Can you tell us a little bit about that period?
Well, I think one of the things about being in a convent, in a boarding school in the middle of nowhere in the everlasting snows, with nuns who are mean, teaches you to be independent. When I emerged, I was pretty strong-willed and I could look after myself. So it didn't bother me that there was this incredible chauvinism, which really was, male chauvinism was rampant in the sheriff's office. And it was water off a duck's back to me, because the men who would work out, who would take testosterone to build their muscles, who were gun nuts, basically, would always call Newkirk when there was a dog that was there on the raid. And I would have to go and get the dog out of the house or look after the animal part of that, because they were afraid of the dogs. Lots of them.
Oh, really? Not because they thought, Ingrid's nice and gentle, she's a woman, she can look after the dog, but because they were afraid of the dogs. That's funny.
They were wearing their bulletproof vests, but if there was, if the guard dogs or a lot of the drug addicts and drug dealers would have dogs, large dogs, fierce dogs, they would say, "Hey, Radio Newkirk, get her over here." And I would take the dogs out of the house for them.
Well, I was going to ask you, are there any skills or attitudes you picked up from working in law enforcement that have been helpful in running PETA?
Yes, I think it was a very good training ground to always look for the facts, to be very, very careful. I mean, if you're going to serve a warrant or you're going to do anything, you're going to sign an affidavit, you have to be sure that your facts are spot on, immaculate. So you double check everything. And there were many times when I was very worried if we were serving a warrant, for example, that I had got everything just right. And so I am meticulous with our facts over here at PETA. We have to be. I mean, we would be criticized so badly if I hadn't learned that skill.
Absolutely. Well, just on that segues nicely into my question, because it obviously comes up a lot. So I'd love to just get your take on it, give you a chance to kind of respond to some of the criticisms, because obviously PETA is, and I know you've acknowledged this publicly, PETA is deliberately provocative. Now, obviously, there's been some criticisms, even within the vegan and the animal rights movements themselves, that some of PETA's campaigns have been racist or sexist, and that, by throwing other humans under the bus to help animals is counterproductive, or even co-opting other social justice movements for human beings is counterproductive. What's your response to that?
Well, my try to make a quick response is since our founding, we have said we've never been racist. We have been sexual, but not sexist, although different waves of feminists criticize different things. So I understand. But since our inception, we have always been against all discrimination, all needless violence, all oppression, all domination. We say there's a principle here. Doesn't matter who the victim is. It's that they're victimized. Doesn't matter that's who it is exactly. It's very easy for human beings to really feel that their group, whoever they relate to, mustn't be compared in any way to any other oppression. And I think that's wrong, because the oppression is the problem, not the identity. And frankly, and this is quite unpopular in many circles to say, I mean, I don't believe that race is something that should divide us. My people, whoever they were, eons ago, came from Africa. It's only because we've been in this climate, we moved to the north, to, in my case, European countries, that we lost the pigmentation in our skin. There are bad Black people, Asian people, bad white people galore, people who have dominated others, always taken any excuse to find a difference and say that it's a failing, because those people or those living beings weren't just like them. And so any difference was categorized as being sub this or sub that. But there are good people all over the world, and there are mean, greedy people all over the world. And there are people who will take advantage, and there are people who will reach out. And I think rather than keep dividing us, I've always said, yes, I happen to be a woman, but in this gender fluid age, I could be anything. And I happen to be 5'6", but that doesn't mean anything. I happen to be white now. I mean, I happen to be a lot of things, but really I'm a melatonin challenged individual, and I am an animal over everything else. I am an animal, and we are all in this together. And those of us who want to help anyone, let's do it. Katrina, one thing I know we've been criticized for is the I'd rather go naked than wear fur campaign. And, I grew up in Europe. I've never really understood, probably as much as Americans, for example, the fact that they're scandalized if some people are scandalized if a woman takes off her clothes. To me, it's a Lady Godiva-ish kind of thing. If you want to use your body, you want to strip for any political cause, or for the hell of it, that's your business. And no man or no other woman is going to tell me or any of our volunteers, dress properly, put your clothes back on, cover your knees, or whatever they say, because we're lucky we're not in Saudi, and some women in Saudi may wish to be covered up. That's fine too. But we are our own boss. And if I wish to strip, and I have at the age of 68, that wasn't sexual. If anybody wanted me then, my God. But it's a political statement. And yes, a lot of them, we say a lot about sex, but for the most part, the women were never completely nude. They were always covered with a banner or something, but who cares? But we've discontinued that campaign because I think society has moved on, not only in that regard, but who wears fur now? We don't need I'd rather go naked than wear fur.
That's true. Are there any campaigns that you look back on, like, there were some where people felt like they were being body shamed, like kind of the bodies were like a beach, that kind of thing. When you get those criticisms, like, do you take them on board and think, okay, that's kind of fair enough, we won't do that? Or what's your kind of reaction when you get those kind of critiques?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, times change and understanding changes. And we would never do some of the campaigns that we've done and some of the ads we've done in the past today. That said, I do believe that it's very sad. Nobody wants to shame anybody who is overweight or even obese. You don't want to shame anybody. But I think it's very sad that the suppression has happened of suggesting what is true, is that for many people, unless it's genetic or it's a disease or something, really, diet is so important because you can be much healthier if you aren't carrying around excess body weight. And so we have always said a vegan diet will slim you down. That's just a fact. Studies have shown it. Slimming down isn't a bad thing. I mean, you don't have to have a bikini body, but it is good not to be overweight. It can come back to haunt you with diabetes and heart conditions, stroke, high blood pressure. So I wish we would be sensible. Jillian Michaels is a fitness person here, and she got absolutely lambasted because she said we should be celebrating, who was it? Do you remember? There's a music star, gosh, her name has completely gone out of my mind, who is very, very heavy. And she's a wonderful star. And people were saying, look, but she's proud of her body. And Jillian said, hang on a minute, let's stop aggrandizing people who, for their weight. Let's stop saying good for you for your weight. Let's say good for you for your singing voice, good for you for your music, good for you for your ethics. But let's just, if we don't have anything that we need to say about, wow, that's fantastic, basically you're overweight and you're proud of it, let's not say that, because it's not giving us a healthy country or healthy world. People are not healthy anymore. They're dying of these conditions. And it would be nice if we could say something respectfully about that.
Yeah, it's a very hot topic. And I'm sure we're going to get lots of comments about this on the show. There's certainly, the different perspectives. Look, I appreciate you sharing that. Now, as well as PETA being criticised, you've also copped a lot of flack yourself, with insults. I believe, you probably had death threats, all kinds of stuff. And that can be hard for anyone to handle. So I'm curious, how do you handle that? Like, what have you mentioned even when you were in law enforcement, the insults kind of, ran off. How did you cultivate that? Because I think that can be important, because a lot of women are involved, in animal advocacy, and sometimes, that can be quite challenging when, someone's in your face, whether they're threatening you, whether it's an email or online. How do you handle that?
I don't want to sound simplistic, and I probably will, but I do believe that it's useful to think this is not personal. It's what I'm saying or what I believe that has struck a nerve. And you're attacking me because of my ideas. So you're really attacking my ideas. And that gives me a chance to see what you're thinking. Because if you yell at me because you don't think this is right because of X, now I know why you don't think it's right. So I can talk to you about X, whatever it is, whether you think there's no climate crisis, or you think that, I need my meat for protein, whatever you think. You've just told me rudely. I mean, I've been slammed down, and people send mail with X's on my eyes, and they've sent animal organs through the mail. Oh, wow. We've had a dead deer head thrown at our door. We've had hamburgers splattered at our windows. We've been told not to. I've been told, don't go there or we'll shoot you. But, wow. It's an opportunity to talk to them, and it means that you've struck a nerve. So I would say just be forthright. If you can keep your cool, keep it. I've not always kept my cool. But if you can, be polite, be educational, keep plowing on, and sooner or later, only real Attila the Hun types will be left behind.
What about when that criticism comes from fellow vegans and animal activists? Like, I've heard you publicly referred to as the Iron Lady of the animal rights movement. Is it different when it comes from kind of people who are, I guess, technically on the same side in terms of what we're advocating for?
I think they're usually well-intentioned. I mean, I cut vegans and people in the animal rights movement extra slack usually. But I do say, please figure it out. Go and look for the facts. Don't just buy anything you read on the internet. Ask yourself, would they really do that? Would she really do that if she cares about animals? And if you think, no, I don't know why she'd say or do that, then have a look and see if we did or I did say or do that. But I do think that sometimes people in any movement, and we're no different than any other social movement, get scared. They get embarrassed. They don't want their friends to think they're associated with radicals or with people who are pushing an agenda. And so they say things like, well, I'm not a PETA person, but, and I think that's fine. You can distance yourself from us. That's fine. But just say the things that people need to hear about animals and how we can help them. So there we are.
That's fair enough. Now, you've been, just following on from that, and I know you've said people often cubbyhole you, and I nearly said pigeonhole, but then I thought, no, we don't put pigeons in holes. So I'm glad that you used the word. You've been cubbyhole. Like, people seem to kind of, like with that HBO special, I think you've said, Pete, they sort of portrayed you as this sad, obsessed person. And on the other hand, like I say, you're this kind of fierce Iron Lady. So can you put the record straight? So who is Ingrid Newkirk? What do you really like? What do we not know about Ingrid that we should know?
Oh, Lord. I mean, I I don't know. I mean, obviously, I care deeply about animals. I try to be strategic. I feel inadequate a lot of the time because I know there must be a cleverer way to do something or a way to reach more people. I do my best, but I don't feel that it's enough ever. I feel very guilty about the privileges that I have. And I won't go live in a cave somewhere and just eat beans and rice. I live my life. And I do think that it's healthy to do so. I get away sometimes. I love to do an English crossword like The Guardian. Sit in bed with a cup of tea and do that. And I very incongruously like Formula One racing. That excites me greatly.
Oh, interesting.
And I've managed to turn that interest into something useful for animals. Michael Schumacher, who of course 7th-time world champion, terrible accident now for many years, but he signed on to our campaign to stop monkey experiments at a university in Germany. Jensen Button, many drivers signed on against foie gras being served at their events. They've done anti-fur commercials for us. You know, I've tried to meld the two so that I won't feel as guilty.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you've been at the helm of PETA for 41 years now. It started in 1980. And during that time, you've seen and continue to see, you know, some of the most awful, you know, horrific cruelty to animals, you know, the videos, the images, sometimes in person. You've seen that. It can be, burnout can be, is obviously a thing, you know, with any kind of activism and, you know, especially with animal activism, just seeing all of that. How do you look after your, I know you've touched on this a little bit in that you've got your other interests, but how do you kind of look after your own mental health and avoid burnout, you know, constantly seeing all of that?
I have not suffered from it as some people have, because I have the privilege of looking back. And I do like history. I look at other social movements, the women's movement, child labor movement, civil rights movement, and I see how they must have felt. We'll never get there. This is hopeless. Everybody is against us. Society is locked in to this abusive way of life. And that gives me strength because they did win. I mean, nothing is perfect still in life in the way others are treated, any others. But my God, we came a long way because people persevered. And just in this 41 years, and I was involved helping animals before that, before PETA began, I've seen such extraordinary changes. I mean, if you had said to me 40 years ago, one day you'll be able to walk into a supermarket and it won't just be cow's milk, there'll be almond milk and macadamia nut milk and soy milk and coconut milk, I would have said, what? And one day, nobody will aspire to wear fur, which when we started, every girl, every woman wanted to have a fur coat. It was like that. And the circus, the exotic animals in the circus will be finished. I never would have imagined it. So I look back and that encourages me. And then I can't walk away. I really can't imagine just one day saying, well, done it, off to the beach now forever. You know, daiquiri, gone. But I really feel I've got this wonderful opportunity every day to do something for them. And people say they don't have a voice. They have a voice. Humans don't listen to it. They don't understand it. They don't hear it. But some people have to speak for them because of that. And I'm just so thankful. Every day I can get up and I can look at the opportunities and I can work for the thing I believe in. How awful if you had never found something that mattered to you in your whole life and you were on your deathbed and you thought, oh, well, there goes my life.
Do you not get traumatized, like by constantly seeing those videos that can kind of traumatize people, you know, just looking at that? Do you sleep at night? Do you have nightmares? I'm just curious, or do you compartmentalize? I know some people are good at compartmentalizing. I'm just curious how you kind of just manage that aspect of it to just not, you know, constantly be re-traumatized by those images.
I think I am constantly re-traumatized. I cry a lot, but I have coping mechanisms that I've developed. I think your brain is a computer, and that you can train it in certain ways. And I'll just tell you a brief story, which meant a lot to me, is our headquarters is at the border of North Carolina and Virginia. And in North Carolina, there's terrible poverty. If people saw the Hurricane Katrina videotape, they couldn't believe that was the United States of America, with poor people being, out there in their trailers and drowning and so on. It's like that where we are in North Carolina. Everyone has dogs out on a chain in the furthest part of the backyard. Oh, never thought about. They can go for a couple of days or 3 days with no food. In winter, they might have a board up against a fence or a metal barrel that gets ice in it. When we first moved there, at night, I couldn't sleep because I had a warm blanket or quilt. My flat was heated, and I would lie there and torture myself thinking, but they're out there. And my friend Linda, who worked with us, said, "Does it help the dogs that you stay awake and torture yourself?" And I said, "Of course it doesn't." And she said, "Does it help you?" And I said, "No, Linda, it doesn't help me. It drives me insane." She said, "Then talk to your computer and conjure up images of something else, and don't allow yourself to think of it. Blot it out so you can go to sleep, awake refreshed the next day, and go out and do something about it." And I thought, that's great. And it takes a lot of discipline and work, but it does help.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. I've started meditating lately as well, which helps, to kind of get off to sleep. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, another thing, I'm going to ask you about this. I haven't seen you talk about this, so you might not want to. And if you tell me no comment, I will respect that. But one of the things I hear a lot from people, particularly, obviously animal advocates, is the impact that either being vegan or doing animal advocacy has on their relationships. Now, you've been married. You were married to Steve Newkirk, who I believe was Formula One racing driver, and then you divorced in 1980, which was when you started PETA. I don't know if the two were connected, and I'm curious if you are willing to share anything about how doing what you do has impacted your personal relationships.
Well, yes, I threw my first marriage away. He's gone now. He was a wonderful man. We remained friends forever. And he was incredibly kind, and we became vegetarian together. I became a vegan later. And I just worked so much because I was so hit in the face by what was happening to animals. This was before PETA. So I was a cruelty investigator, worked in law enforcement for animals after being a sheriff. And I saw such terrible things. I could never stay at home. I just had to be out there all the time working on animal things. And it hurt our relationship terribly. And so that became more important to me than my marriage. So that left. I've been in a relationship for a long time now, and we're both vegans, and we both care about animals, and we both are driven. So it's easier. But I do say to people, half jokingly, always date a meat eater, dairy eater, somebody who is not into animal rights, then convert them and then move on.
That's so funny. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And that's obviously something that's private that you do. And so I'm not going to ask you any more about that. But I appreciate you sharing that, because I think sometimes people might assume, because you don't talk about it publicly, that, like I say, that's all you do and you haven't got time for relationships. So I think it's actually lovely that you have managed to do that. And I think that will be helpful to others to say you can do both, which I think is lovely. I'm just going to address what you just said, because I'm laughing when you said about dating a meat eater, because that's another big discussion in the animal rights movement. Should you date a meat eater or a vegan? And I make a joke that when I met my partner, Tracy, she was a bisexual carnivore. Now she's a lesbian vegan. So I did a really good job. I didn't move on, though. We've stayed together, but it is an interesting one. But thank you for sharing that. Did you ever want children?
No. My mother used to collect clothes for, when I would marry and have a child. And I always said to her, I'm not going to do it, not going to have a child, not. And she never believed me. And then when I was 20-something, I got sterilized. It was the very first sterilization. So, it came out. It was a laparoscopy. And I thought, that's what I want. None of this other stuff, But I've never felt, it's just like, and forgive me, everybody who has a child out there, but for me, it was always adoption, always adoption. Our home was always full of animals we took in, human refugees we took in from Tibet or from wherever. And I never felt there was a need or any great urge to have mini me. I just... I was lucky that I wasn't driven, but I also intellectually at some point I wasn't into it. And so here I am, and I'm a great auntie.
Fantastic. I love that. And I'm glad you said that. I'm the same. I have not felt those maternal feelings, not towards human children anyway. But it's interesting. And I asked that because I was curious. I saw on LinkedIn a female entrepreneur posted something recently saying she was being interviewed on like a business podcast. And one of the questions was framed as if, oh, how do you cope, being a female entrepreneur, having to sacrifice that family balance around having kids versus career. And she was just like, well, you wouldn't ask a man that. And it's not a sacrifice. What if my actual life goals were to create this business? So it's just kind of interesting that kind of topic. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, in terms of your day-to-day, I think people are kind of curious, what do you do at PETA? I mean, obviously you're out and about speaking, and obviously we'll talk about, how COVID has impacted that, but what is your kind of day-to-day? I mean, it's probably, I'm sure every day is different, but can you give us a little snapshot of, what you actually do at PETA nowadays?
Aside from my nails, it was a very different life before COVID here, because I had come out with my book, Animalkind, and I was on the road every single day. And almost every day I was flying to another city. I went to England, I came here, and so on. So I was giving talks about the book, doing radio, TV, podcasts, etc. But I was on the road, dragging my laundry from place to place. And then it suddenly stopped. And so it all went to Zoom. So I still do. I think last month I reached 20 million people on Zoom and podcasts and radio things. So I still do that. It depends where I am. My joy is to be at the Virginia office because we have 3 full-time, huge Winnebago type vehicles that go out into the neighborhoods and spay and neuter. And we sterilize all pit bulls for free, feral cats, you name it, even though I'm not very much in favor of having feral cat colonies because most of them come to a bad end. But we do all that for nothing. And we're out, we bring in animals from terrible situations and have beautiful guest rooms for them and look after them. And some of them have to be euthanized too. And so I find myself doing some hands-on when I'm there.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yes. And I get in very early in the morning and I like to clean the animals who are in the guest room so they don't sit with their legs crossed, or take them out for walks, or give them breakfast if they're not going on the clinic. But we do a lot of brainstorming, a lot of creative work. I'm interviewing people, trying to fill research positions now. It's really a mixed bag, a lot of administrative rubbish that everybody hates. But coming up with event ideas. We just did the inauguration here, the drive-in. We had to cancel it, but that was fine. We did it virtually in the end. We thought we'd be able to do it in the snow.
And you've just moved, we were talking before we came on air, that you've now got an office in Washington, D.C. Tell us about what the neighbours did when they heard that Ingrid Newkirk and PETA were going to be neighbours to the White House in Washington, D.C.
You know, Katrina, we're 8 blocks up from the White House. We're on 16th Street. So every demonstration, and of course, Black Lives Matter, we had water out for the dogs. We had sandwiches for the people. They stream past our office. It's the direct route down to Black Lives Matter Plaza, to the White House, and so on. So any protesters, of course, we had the Proud Boys and those other militant, ghastly people coming to try for the insurrection around the inauguration. They came past. We have a big elephant statue in our front garden. And on it, we have "Against All Injustice." That's the banner the elephant wears. So everybody says, "Where's your office?" And we say, "Well, you know where the giant elephant." Oh, yes. When we were moving here, a front group for the furriers, the circus people, the lab equipment suppliers, decided to canvass the neighborhood and warn people that PETA was coming to town and really put the wind up their skirts. So they distributed leaflets to the whole neighborhood that said, be careful, lock up your dogs and cats. PETA is against all pet ownership. They're going to be your neighbors. Watch out. They'll call in the vegan police if they see you barbecuing. And you just think, oh, really? Don't you have anything else to do?
Exactly. And the furriers of all people, they think nothing of skinning animals and making fur coats out of them. Oh, gosh, that's funny.
But it is good. We have great neighbors because they come to us if they have an animal problem. And there was actually a church across the street. They had a stray chicken. And in Washington, sometimes chickens are used in religious rituals for the Santeria, or they're used in cockfights in someone's basement. And that chicken escaped, ended up at the church. They didn't know what to do. So we went and we took her, and she's now in the sanctuary.
Oh, lovely. I love that. This has been brilliant. So the final section, I've just got some what's called rapid fire questions. So I'm just going to ask you a question, and you just answer in maybe one sentence or slightly more, just ideally. So, and then we'll wrap up. What's the most courageous thing you've done? I know you've done a lot of courageous things in your life. If you could pick one that immediately comes to mind.
I don't think anything I've done is particularly courageous, but I'm very wary of getting into large bodies of water. And I decided to, it was just me, crawl into a sewer pipe where water was being flooded, because there was a puppy in the middle of the intersection underground who was going to drown. And I had to go on my hands and knees, get the puppy, which I did, thank you, and then back out with the puppy out of this pipe, which I barely fit into. And I think for me, that was the most frightening.
Wow, interesting. Thank you for sharing that. What does leadership mean to you, and what style of leader do you believe you are?
Oh, a tyrant. That's only half a joke, because
I know. I was thinking probably, there's another word for it, benevolent dictator, and I was wondering whether that might be a fit for you.
I'm grateful for anything anyone does, but really, I don't like whining, and I do. It's not a rest home for people. We have to get a job done, and it's incredibly important. So if you come to work for us, I want you to work hard. That's the way it is.
Do you make all the final decisions, like people pitch in their ideas and ultimately you're kind of like, thank you for your feedback, but no, this is what we're doing? Is it? I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm simplifying that, but
no, I mean, there are things I don't need to make the decision on. They know better than I do. The marketing people, the youth marketing people, the technical people, they know much more than I do. But if it's a matter of policy, of the principle that animals are not ours, yes. And if I think it's too crude or it's too stupid, I will often say, no, I'm not doing that.
Okay, gotcha. What do you love most about yourself?
Oh, dear. Oh, gosh, I'm English, Katrina. Sorry.
I know, I'm joking there. Come on, give me one thing. I ask everybody this. I'm not just asking you. These are questions I ask everyone.
Well, touch wood. I suppose the thing I like most is that at 71 3/4, I am still not taking any medicines. And I love a long walk, and I'm energetic.
You're okay. All right. Any particular character about you that you really love about yourself?
It's uncomfortable, but I'm glad I have it, and that's empathy.
Okay, lovely. I love that. How would you like to be remembered? So you probably won't have a tombstone. I know that you say you would actually be quite happy for people to fry up your body and serve out Ingrid burgers. But if there were a tombstone or a virtual one, what would you like to be on your epitaph?
Stop thinking about me and go out and do something for animals.
I love that. I love that. And finally, what have been maybe one or two key lessons that you've learned throughout your journey as a vegan woman leader that you would like to share that you think would be helpful to other vegan women leaders?
I think never be embarrassed about what you believe in when you know you're right. Always just forthrightly, honestly stick to it, and you will open eyes and minds and hearts, even if you don't see it in front of you. I think that is my most important thing, is never be silent. You are depended upon to change everything. So please don't be shy. Don't be timid. You're a powerful person.
I love that. Ingrid, it's been so lovely speaking with you today. I think we've touched on some subjects that maybe you don't necessarily talk about a lot. And I know some of it's going to be controversial, but that's quite fitting in that is PETA's thing. But I really appreciate you sharing your stories, more about you, more about PETA. And of course, I encourage everyone. Ingrid's written 14 books, and you can go to PETA.org where you can find out all the information about PETA. You can look up Ingrid's work on Amazon and other places. I say her latest book, Animalkind, is wonderful, so make sure you grab a copy of that. It's been my pleasure today to speak with you, Ingrid. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. And if anybody needs anything from us, we're right here.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Bye for now. Ingrid, just stay on the line. I'll see you just a moment in the green room. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Bye for now.
Bye.